Welcome to the Rehydrate interview series, a forum for discussion around Lewis Chishin's Remembrance of Earth's Past series. My name's Dan. Each episode, I will be speaking with a guest about their thoughts and experiences on reading this series. Spoiler warning for listeners. This episode will contain spoilers for all of the Three-Body Problem, The Dark Forest, Death's End, and any other media that we happen to discuss. Today, I'm joined by Josh. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for inviting me to be on this. This is cool.
So yeah, maybe we can start with a little background on yourself.
Yeah, okay. Well, like you said, my name is Josh. I live in Buffalo, New York, and I make music. That's like my thing. And I also happen to really enjoy science fiction, and lately science fiction novels.
So yeah, let's get into a little bit your background in science fiction reading. So is this your first science fiction series that you're into, or had you been like a reader in previously?
It's probably this. I gotta say, this is probably the first series that I've really gotten into reading wise. I've only starting reading science fiction maybe in the past couple of years. Other than that, I think maybe, and I probably didn't even realize I was going to be reading like that. It was going to be science fiction at the time, but it was like Kurt Vonnegut stuff. I read a couple of his books that had sci-fi elements that really got me interested in it. But this is probably the first serious like science fiction and hard science fiction thing I've read.
Right. That's cool. And so how did you find out about this series specifically?
So I think what I was doing was I listened to a lot of science-y type podcasts actually before I started reading any science fiction. So I've always had like the interest in like astrophysics and stuff, just as like a light, hobby type thing. But I'll listen to like Neil deGrasse Tyson's podcast, or there's a couple others, and they would mention like science fiction books in passing, and it got me interested, like maybe I would enjoy it. So I went out looking for a science fiction book that would be like heavy on the science part of it. And I was coming up with Three-Body Problem. And I think the first book, I actually got it from the library and started reading it that way. So that's how I ended up reading these books.
Cool. And so you read the paperback?
What did I do? I think I actually got it on my Kindle. I think I used through the library. I used like Libby and or Overdrive, and was able to get it that way. And then I think I did a combination of both. I was like in and out of getting the ebooks, but then there would be a long wait to get it. So I would, in the meantime, get the paperback. So I did both. I think and actually I think The Dark Forest was mostly audiobook that I listened to most of it.
Yeah, I had the same experience actually. So I actually read, I listened to the Three-Body Problem for the first time because I'm also really into podcasts, and I kind of I had a long like road trip ahead of me, and I was like, well, I'll just listen to an audiobook. And then like I was looking for recommendations. I heard about this, and so I listened to the audiobook. I don't know, like to me, like the experience isn't as good as an audiobook because like I don't know, you kind of like lose focus, like you're paying, you're not always thinking about it. Was that your experience as well?
Yeah, that's funny. That was totally my experience because I know The Dark Forest was mainly on audiobook, and I feel like maybe even specifically with this book being like that it's a Chinese translation. I think listening to it and like the characters' names, maybe I was having a harder time, and goes with all audiobooks too, just keeping track of the characters and what's actually happening in the story. When I read it in front of me, I just comprehend it a little bit better. And also I think a big part of it is that when a paragraph, I can go back and reread that paragraph, reread that page 2, 3 times if I need to, which you could do on an audiobook, but it would be almost like in the background for me, and it would not be super convenient and easy to rewind to the exact spot. So I would have
Right.
to agree with you. I had the same type of experience.
Yeah, I felt like the thing, especially for the names and stuff. Like, yeah, the audio, like the names are kind of hard to remember, especially for non-Chinese audiences. I
Right.
had the same experience also with like Game of Thrones when I was watching the TV show. Like, there's so many characters, and like I
Oh,
didn't know who was who at the beginning, and then I started reading the books, and I was like, oh, okay, like, that makes more sense. Like, you're just able to focus more, I think, when you're reading.
oh, really?
Um,
So you even found that with the same type of maybe issues you had with an audiobook you had with watching a TV series? I didn't
I
think of
think,
that, but I have watched Game of Thrones, and I would always have to like go back and like, all right, I need a recap of this, or like before the next season starts up, I'm like, I need to rewatch and get a
yeah.
recap because I can't keep track of the families and everything.
I think like yeah, especially in the first season or like the first couple of episodes, and like there's so many people thrown at you, and like it's like a
Yeah.
whole new world, and like you don't know what's happening, and you get in and they're all in like kind of medieval stuff, dress or whatever, and they all kind of look the same sometimes, and it's like
Mhm.
who is who, and like yeah.
Yeah.
So I think like the books are able. I was able to focus a lot more on like understanding who's talking because I have to say like Bronze says whatever that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever had this too, but I have this with books in general. When I'm reading, I might get lost in thought, or I might, when I come to a dialogue section and something happens when I see those quotation marks and I know I'm reading dialogue, I like
Mm.
commit it to memory and I'm paying attention, and I'll realize like, oh, I wasn't paying attention to any of that. And then I have to
Yeah,
go back and reread. I don't know.
that does happen to me too. Like, yeah, I'll like be reading or like I don't know. Yeah, I don't know like why that happens. Like you're reading it, but you're not really reading it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Have you read other Liu Cixin novels at all besides the series?
No, I have not. I know he's got the other ones out there, and I have them like, I'm like, I'll come around to him eventually. I know he's got a lot of short stories, but for some reason, I don't know why I just have not like read any short stories. I'm like, there's too many other novels, like full stories I want to read first, and then
Right.
I'll get around to them.
Yeah. And so for this series specifically, which of the three books would you consider to be your favorite, or do you have a favorite?
Yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
Death's End for me. Yeah.
Same, same. So why do you consider that to be your favorite?
it just it is like they're all like wild books and like really cool, but the that's and this just this the scale of it and the scope, and I had never read anything or even like heard any story that just like dealt with concepts so large as Death's End did.
Yeah.
Very memorable for me.
Yeah, I remember when I first got it, like you'd saw like the in the beginning like the list of the eras, and you're looking at it, it's like, whoa, why do they get to like 4 billion at the end? Like,
Yeah,
how's that gonna work?
yeah. Oh yeah, when they jumped ahead, whatever, when they teased out 400 years until Trisolarans arrive, I was like, oh man, this is pretty wild. We're going way in the future. I had like I had no idea what was in store.
So I guess what are some of your favorite moments? I guess from the either from Death's End or from the whole series. Like, what are some of the like when you think about the series? Like, what are the sort of the big temple things that stick up in your mind?
I think the biggest thing, maybe like one of them that had the biggest impact on me, was in Death's End when they get trapped in the death line, or the
Yeah,
whatever it is, the trap where they just start spinning around and they are stuck in that little like basically like a time warp for
right.
18 million years. I remember when I was reading that part in the book, and they're describing what it's like to be inside the capsule and it's getting cold and dark, and I just was getting just like a lot of the books did this a lot to me. There would be lots of moments where I would just get like this pit in my stomach, and I would just like some indescribable feeling that's like dread, that just how they're stuck in that. That was
Yeah.
probably one of my favorite parts from that book.
And I think like also like the realization that like she's so close to like meeting up with Yin Tian Ming, and like then it's just like gone, right? Like millions of, or however many years pass, right? And when they're stuck in those death lines, then like you just know that like that opportunity is gone. So like that makes it even more powerful, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty wild though that the message that was left from, who was it? Was it her friend AA, right? That she was the one that was on that
Yeah, they left her on the
planet
planet.
Blue or whatever.
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
able to leave the message for that. They were still able to read the message after so long.
Yeah, yeah, I think they set it up when they're on Pluto, and they were talking about like how the only messages that like really stand the test of time is carving it in stone. So like that
Right.
kind of set that up.
Right, right, on Pluto. Oh yeah, I almost forgot it. There's a lot like I have forgotten about. So like just today I was kind of skimming through some of the Wikipedias for these stories, and I was like, oh my God, I forgot about this. I forgot about that. But
Yeah,
Pluto, the all the paintings and everything they go down. That was
yeah. I had this after the first time I read it. I think there's just so much information in all three books that like when I went to go reread it, and especially like when I started doing this podcast, like kind of more studying like what happens like in the smaller chunks.
mm,
I'd realized I forgot a lot of stuff too. Like for some reason, like in the first book, there's the whole like struggle between the redemptionists and the Adventists, and then the survivors. Like for some reason, that didn't even register with me when the first time I read it.
oh
I
yeah,
guess like because like especially in Three Body Problem, I feel like the pacing is weird there, and like they kind of dump a lot of information at the very end, and then it's just like and then you're overwhelmed with like Project Sofan and the listener chapters and like Operation Good Jung and all this stuff happens all at once. And it's like
yeah,
I think some of the more intricate details kind of get lost in first reading. So I think this series really benefits from multiple readings. I don't know. How do you think?
yeah. I definitely agree with you. I actually just maybe like a week or two. So a week or two ago, I started rereading it, Three Body Problems. So, and also what's cool is I found out about your podcast about the same time. So I've been listening to your
Oh, cool.
podcast of with the reading of the book. So
Oh,
I won't.
awesome.
I have to listen to the next. I think I'm 3 episodes of your podcast in it. So I'm up to one of the. I think it's the second time, the second game session of Three Body
Yeah,
is where
yeah.
I've read up to. And I'm listening to the podcast along with it, which is really cool. And
Uh,
I'm catching
like,
so much more. I already
uh,
knew, like right when I started, I was like, oh, this is like going to be a really good reread, probably much better than the first read. I'm just really looking forward to it.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of like small details, like even in the game that there's there that I didn't catch. And yeah, so like the redemptionist versus the Adventist, and like there's and like also like one of the things as like a person who's read the entire series, like I catch like a lot of talk of like dimensionality throughout the entire series, right? And
Mm.
I don't know if he's like intentionally do that to set up like what happens at the very end of Death's End with the two-dimensional attack, but like I think maybe that's just like a overarching theme for the entire series. But there's a lot of those kind of references, and yeah, as you're reading, you kind of catch those.
Oh yeah, I don't know that I've at least in my second read through yet. I'm not sure that I've picked up on any of those hints yet. Not sure if they've come yet, but now I probably will. That I'll be on the lookout for it.
I might just be like overly thinking about it. Like every time like, I have that ebook when I'm reading it now, and like I'll
Yeah.
highlight every time it says like dimensional, anything to do with dimensionality, I'll highlight it.
You're like, oh, foreshadowing to
Yeah,
the yeah.
exactly. So when you read one of the also things that struck me when I read Three Body Problem, I also like I said, I was looking for a science fiction book, and this is like hardcore science fiction. I was like, great, that sounds awesome. And
Yeah.
I picked it up and I started reading it, and it's like talking about the Cultural Revolution. I was like, what? Is this the right book?
Mhm.
Did you have that kind of experience as well?
Yeah, totally. I was like, wait, I thought this was science fiction, and like you, I could kind of tell like the in the writing of Xian Lu, like that it was like, okay, like I can tell that this is sciency type writing, just the way that he like describes
Mm,
things are so like analytical and rational and logical, even the way that he describes emotions and things. So I was like, okay, I know this. I could tell this is could be a science fiction book, but yeah, there was none of that in the beginning. And I mean, I wasn't like bored or turned off by the book, but I could see once I got into like where they go into the three body into the video game and the V suit, I
yeah.
was like, maybe I don't know, maybe they didn't need that. Like maybe it could have been a more condensed kind of introduction and backstory, but I don't mind. I think after having read the whole series, I don't mind it, and I think it makes sense. But I
Yeah.
wonder once the TV show comes around how they're going to do that, because if the whole first episode or two episodes are all cultural revolution, it might, you might lead the audience into thinking it's a different type of show than what it is.
Right, and you don't really even know that there's aliens in it until 2/3 through the book, maybe, and
That's
even then
true.
it's like, maybe. Like it's
Right.
not until, like, actually, like, we get to, part 3 of the book where she starts talking about sending the message and getting the messages back. It's like, "Oh, okay, aliens, I get it." But it's like, and but up until then, it's like, yeah, we're not even sure they're coming, and yeah, I don't know how they're gonna square that with
Right.
the TV audience.
That's so true, because I did read before I even started the series. I didn't read any spoilers, but I read enough to know there was going to be aliens in it. So
Hmm.
I think for me reading it, it was just building tension, and then it was finally like so satisfying when they introduced them. But yeah, if somebody, let's say, this comes out on Netflix, I know nothing about it, I hit play and I'm watching it, like that would actually be great. Like, what a shocker if you think you're watching one type of show and then all of a sudden there's aliens coming to invade.
Yeah. One of the other interviews I did for this series, it was a person who actually read the Chinese versions as well, and he had said that, like, in the Chinese version, that they switched the order of the opening chapters, and like the book actually opens with Wang Miao's chapters, and then goes into the Cultural Revolution stuff, which I thought was pretty
Oh, really?
interesting.
That
Yeah.
is? Oh, that's crazy. I actually, as I'm reading the book now through for the second time, and I'm like thinking about the TV series later, I am almost imagining something like that, where it starts off with Wang's story, but then they could periodically give you glimpses of the Cultural Revolution and kind of go back and forth. Like I've seen like a lot of series do that.
The one thing I'm also wondering how they're gonna do is, like, how they're gonna deal with Wang Miao in general, like, because he just, after the first book, just kind of disappears. Like, that's weird. Like in Game of Thrones, they killed Ned Stark at the end of the first season, which is
Yeah,
shocking, but he's dead, right? But
right.
in this one, Wang Miao just, like, doesn't show up. Like, Dasher mentions him in passing, like, one time in the in the later books, saying like, "Oh, I knew this guy one time." But, like, I think that's gonna be strange for audiences as well.
That is weird. Honestly, I kind of forgot about that part of it. And as I'm like thinking now, I can't even remember like what happens to Wing in the end of the first book. That's like I kind of always like that with shows and movies and stories, isn't that if I watch a movie or I watch a TV series or I read a book 2 years later, I honestly don't even remember much about it. So when I rewatch it or reread it, it's like I'm reading it for the first time again.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's kind of nice in a way, I guess.
Yeah, sometimes, like, you'll like really like a TV show or something, and you're like, I wish I could just, like, forget this entire thing and, like, just
Right.
rewatch it fresh.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So do you have some, like, who are some of your favorite characters from the series?
I know, you know what? I had thought about that before this, and I kind of came to the realization that I really wasn't like huge on characters in this series. I was
Hmm.
really more feeling the ideas and the science of it, and I don't know if that's anything to do with the writing, I wonder, or if it's just kind of the way that I approach books and these science fiction stories in general, but I don't know. None of them are super memorable to me
Yeah.
and stand out. I'm more in it for the ideas.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, I think, like, his writing style is not really character forward. It's more
Yeah,
uh, science forward, and, like, big ideas, and kind of big plot ideas.
yeah.
To me, I think the only character who's, like, really there's two characters who are, like, really fleshed out would be Yo and Jie. First of all, it's like, I think she
Mhm.
has the most backstory of everybody, and, like, her parts, like, where like, we find out she's a commander, we find out she killed her husband, those kind of things. Those are, like, really huge moments for me in the first book. And then I think, like, in the second book, like, Luo Ji is also pretty fully formed character as well. I think not to the level of Yo Jie, but he's up there too.
Yeah, that was all the he was the one that really came to mind. Just
Mm.
just because of how badass the sword holder is, and
Yeah.
just how freaking awesome he is as the sword holder.
Yeah, thinking
And
of
then
like the 100-year-old some guy, like just sitting there like cross-legged.
oh my god, yeah, that was such cool imagery. And then to get such a stark contrast, uh, my pronunciations are horrible. I know you have the pronunciation guide, and I should have checked it out, but I think Shenjin.
Oh yeah, Changxin. Yeah.
Yeah, when the stark contrast to her taking over, that was another moment you asked me earlier, like the big standout moments, and that was another one that did it for me. Was when
Yeah.
she took over and immediately tried the Tricelarans are on the move. That was crazy.
And another part of the book, another experience I had when reading the book was like some of the really big high concept stuff that I talked about, like especially when they introduced like Project Sophon, or when they start talking about like the 4-dimensional pockets, or like even the 2-dimensional attack. Like they're really, to me, it was hard to understand when I first read it, and I had to like go back and reread it. Did you? I guess like what was your experience reading those like really like high scientific chapters?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't think I went and reread it a lot. I was okay like reading through some really heady stuff, some heady sciencey, mathy, physicsy stuff, and then just being like, okay, I don't understand that, but that's okay. Like I trust that the author does, and I'm just gonna like go with it. Like, but but there were things, especially when they're talking about the dimensionality things, where they're trying to explain what it could possibly be like to experience 4 dimensions or to see a 2-dimensional attack from 3D space. Like that
Yeah.
was stuff that like kind of, smoke coming out of my ears and like really be like, what it like trying to imagine that stuff is another reason that I love these books. And
Yeah, I wonder, like, again, for the TV show, how much they're gonna try to explain that stuff, or if they're gonna try to dumb it down, like, and how are they gonna film it? Like, even like the Project Sophon stuff, where they talk about a proton, unfolding or from 11 dimensions to 2 dimensions. Like, what does
yeah,
that look like on the screen?
right.
Like, yeah,
No,
not to
these are
mention like, 2-dimensional attacks later on, or that kind of thing.
yeah. I mean, some of it like I could like visualize a thing happen like with the proton like unfolding or whatever. Like I could picture maybe something tiny, minuscule, blowing up to the size of bigger than Earth. But
Hmm.
when when they're talking about a person going into like 4 dimensions, I'm like, this is something in my mind that would not even be able to be explained in words. So like, how are we gonna do it with pictures on a TV screen? I don't even know. I'm very curious to see how they go about that.
Yeah. So what are your general, like, what's your feeling around the TV show? Like, are you apprehensive or excited?
I am to definitely being optimistic about it. I
Okay.
need to be optimistic about it because I really want it to be great. I
Yeah.
I think though, like I love the Game of Thrones series, and I think those guys did a good job with especially the first handful of seasons where they had good
Yeah.
pre-written material to go off of. They were not, freestyling much of anything. I think if they go about it that, and as long as they include this entire story, like they don't, I had heard people, debating, wondering if like, that the TV series would end very well at the end of Dark Forest, and they could leave out the whole third book. But I would be really, really disappointed if that was the case. If they did
Totally.
something like that.
Yeah. The Death End is like the whole reason I want to watch it, because
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, that book is every time like I even think about that book, it's just like, I'm like, as I'm doing this podcast, I'm like so eager for my friends to like, experience it with me. So because like I like the Rehydrate problem, but like I really really like Death End. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I got a bunch of people for Christmas. I got them this book. I don't know if any of them will read it. I don't even think any of them like science fiction, but I got it anyways because I was like, somebody needs to read this and discuss it with me and be on the same page.
After I read the series, I did the same thing at work with like a bunch of people. I was like, you have to read, like, everyone had like any kind of inkling to like science fiction. I was like, you got to read this, you got to read this. And I got one person to do it. It was
You
great.
did.
I read the whole series.
I got someone to do it too. The first person was actually, so like I make music and I hired someone to do the artwork for my album, and I got him to read it, and he's almost through Death's End now. So we've been talking about it as he gets through the story too. He knows about the
Great.
podcast too, but he's really afraid of spoilers. So
Yeah.
just like just to hang out for a while. But he's almost done with it. Almost done with the book.
Awesome. Well, if he wants to be interviewed, send him my way. I'm happy to
I will
talk to anybody. Yeah. So actually, I do want to talk about your music as well. So I know you have a concept album that was based off of your experiences with the show. Can you talk to us a little about like how that came about and what your process was there?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, the songs I had been writing over the past year, maybe even a little less than a year, but yeah, the way I went about it, like I mean, I make instrumental music. I do all the instruments. There's no singing. There's no lyrics. Um, so I don't often like go right into a song with like, all right, here's this story that I'm going to tell with this song, and now I'm going to write it. I don't really do it like that. I just kind of like write what comes naturally. But over the course of writing all these songs, I was reading the Three Body Problems series and specifically Death's End. And when I kind of look back at all the songs that I had and the music I had written, I was like, I need to like, I want to like dedicate the album to these stories. And I didn't really like sit down and be like, okay, now I'm going to write a song about the deterrence era. But these books, as I was reading them, definitely had a big impact on me. And it's all connected in one way or another. So that's how I kind of decided that the album is going to be a concept album around this.
So is the music itself like based off of the ideas, or just the titles, or is it a combination of both?
It would be, so the titles definitely are the artwork, and the music itself. What I did is I took the finished body of work and I arranged it kind of in a way that would almost be like the telling of the stories in chronological order, kind of following along with the books. So it was definitely like a deliberate, decision of what song is going to be placed where, and what section of the story does this sound best kind of like represent. That's kind of the approach I went at it with.
Cool. And is it totally by yourself? You did everything, or do you have other people
Yeah.
working with you?
No, this was all by myself. I recorded all at home, kind of like a new project that I've been starting since COVID, and had a lot of time at home, and this has been a really great outlet for me. And I record everything here. I play everything on guitar. I program the drums out. I live in an apartment that's not. Even if I had a drum set here, I don't think I'd be miking it up and playing. I live in the city and lots of close neighbors, but yeah, it's all done here. Everything except the artwork, really.
Cool. And do you have other albums? Or are you working on other albums right now?
I had some other songs that I released before. The hiding gene is the name of the concept album. So I had a few songs I released before then, but the hiding gene was my most recent one. Just came out on January 15th. And actually, I am working on something now, and it's almost done. And it's a direct follow up to the hiding gene, and it's going to be called the cleansing gene. And
Nice.
it's more of it's one song, kind of just like a I don't know, like an addendum or like just a B-side maybe. I wouldn't say a B-side, but yeah, I love the whole idea of the hiding gene and the cleansing gene, and like you've got one or you've got the other. So
Hmm.
I'm trying to
Yeah,
represent the cleansing gene is
cool.
going to be a little more aggressive sounding
Right.
than
This is more of my personal interest, but like, can you maybe talk a little bit about like the actual like technology that you use? Like, what kind of gear, what kind of programs do you use to actually make the music?
sure.
I've
Yeah.
been thinking, I've been getting into as I'm working on a podcast, like watching a lot of videos around audio gear and microphones and that kind of thing. So that's why I'm
Oh
interested.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, right here, so in front of me, I'm on my iMac, and I have a Focusrite audio interface. It's just a Scarlett 2. So it
Hmm.
has two inputs. I could do either a quarter inch uh, jack for my guitar, my electric guitar, or my electric bass. I can also plug in XLR, so I have a microphone, although I didn't really do anything with the microphone on my any of my other music because I didn't really mic up everything was digital, so I plugged the guitar in. I use Reaper is my DAW on my computer that I use, and everything that you hear as far as like a guitar amp or that's all digital. It's all through amp sims. The
Cool.
drums are all through a program called Addictive Drums, which is all MIDI based drums. And then I have a keyboard right here in front of me, a Nectar Impact LX49 Plus, and it's a MIDI keyboard, but it also has drum pads on it. So
Hmm.
on the last album, some of the drum beats I tapped out with my fingers. Some of them I used a mouse and keyboard and I clicked them in onto a grid to make the beat. And a lot of it's a combination of those two. What am
Cool.
I leaving out here? Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. I can send you like a picture video afterwards if
Yeah,
you're
definitely.
curious too what the setup looks like for sure.
Cool. Yeah. So how did you like? Did you have to go? Like, how did you learn how to do all that stuff? Just self-taught, or did you actually go to any kind of classes or anything?
Well, I went to college. My first couple of years were for sound recording
Oh,
technology
okay.
there, but I ended up switching majors from that over to music business. But I did
Hmm.
pick up, and I've always played in bands. I've always played drums, played guitar, and the bands have always recorded our stuff. So I've been in studios and, watching over the shoulder of the engineer and asking questions so I always kind of had like this little background fundamental knowledge of it, which definitely made it a lot easier when I actually bought my own equipment and sat down. It was tons of YouTube videos, YouTube tutorials, which is amazing, and
Yeah.
Reddit, specifically for Reaper. The program I use has a really good Reddit community on there. Asked tons of questions, watched tons of YouTube videos, and like was really amazed at what I could learn from YouTube.
Cool. So yeah, last question is just any recommendations or things that you're looking for, like read next in read or watch or anything that you would recommend to people who are already fans of the Three Body series.
Yeah, let me see. I actually pulled open my Kindle like library to see what I've read recently that I really liked, and I would have to say, what I really liked was Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke.
Hmm.
I don't Have you read that one?
I haven't, but I love 2001 the movie, so I mean I'm sure
Yeah.
that.
This was really cool. I guess it's a series of books, but every recommendation that I saw was saying just read the first one. Don't bother with any of the other ones, which I
Hmm.
liked because I was like, okay, that's not as like one book I can do. It's not as big of a commitment to start a series of books.
Yeah.
I loved it because Arthur C. Clarke goes into describing at great length kind of they're basically exploring an ancient spaceship or something, some type of thing in space that they find. They go investigate, they go inside of it. but they're just describing in very much the same hard sciencey type of way what it would be like, and they go very much into. I'm trying to like say it without spoiling anything from the book, but some of the same things that I just read. Like I just read a part in Three Body Problem where he goes into the game, into the V suit, and he plays the game, and it's where one of the suns and one of the stars comes so close to the planet that they're on that he's
Mm.
looking up in the sky and the sun fills the entire sky, and he says all of a sudden it's as if he's, instead of looking up, he's falling down towards it. And
Right.
that type of like perspective and change, there's a lot of that in Rendezvous with Rama, which is why I like it and I'd recommend it.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Is there any way that people should connect with you online or find your work?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you can listen to all of my music at thoughttrials.com. And you can also kind of stay. I'm most active on Instagram. My name there is Thought Trials. So if you just do at symbol Thought Trials, you'll find me there, and you can talk to me there too if you'd like.
Great. Well, thank you again very much. I appreciate your time.
Awesome.
If you would like to participate in the series going forward, please leave comments by emailing us at rehydrate@fastmail.com or on Twitter at rehydratepod. Thanks again.
Thanks, Dan.